Space Babies is the first episode. Well, is it? Is it the first episode? Is it the second episode? It's an episode, a Russell T Davies episode of season 1 of Doctor Who, the 2024 season. Episode 2 on America and Disney Plus, I believe. Episode 1 in some other places. Depends how you count the church at Ruby Road. But it's here. We've watched it. We're Neo from Australia, Ingiga from England, Missy from New Zealand. What did we think of this episode of Doctor Who?
It was an episode of Doctor Who.
And you can't say much better than that. It was an episode. I was really disappointed with it. I guess, actually, no, that's a lie. This is exactly what I expected, but I was hoping that I was wrong in my expectations.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I had enormously high expectations for this one, just because it always seemed like it was a bit of a... Like, it was in this weird position, because it wasn't the sort of musical bonanza of the following week, and it also wasn't Ruby's first episode either. I mean, when we talked about Ruby Road, we speculated, oh, maybe episode 1 will be like the big thing, but then it's sort of like, it isn't as well. So, yeah, it just seems very concerned with this idea of how can we introduce the show in a really quite trad way, but while also being a bit self-conscious about how weird we can be as well. So it's doing lots of self-consciously sort of funny, sort of quirky stuff as well. And, you know, that will work differently for different people. I didn't hate the episode, but it's not really overachieving in any way.
Yeah, I think self-consciously doing what it's doing is a very good way to describe it, because it's introducing all the usual Doctor Who stuff, and also it's weird and new for Doctor Who, but in doing that, it's very typical for Doctor Who. I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it either.
When it was announced RTD was coming back, I'd followed his career. So, you know, the 13, 14-ish years since he left RTD1, he went on to do loads of interesting things and very different things, and he developed as a writer in interesting ways. He made lots of great television. He did lots of interesting moves. And so when he was coming back, I thought he'd be different, and by different, I meant better in lots of ways. And I really liked the 60th. So I was really hopeful. I was really happy about season 1. I thought it was going to be really good. Yeah, I really didn't like this episode. It's nice to have Murray Gold back. And I really liked, towards the ending, a scene I actually liked. It's easy to list the things I do like, because it's a short list. Towards the end, where the monster is, you know, getting pulled out of the airlock, and 15's going to go save the monster. We're getting some music that sounds like it's evoking kind of the bridge part of A Good Man, the 12th Doctor's theme. And it's like 15 mustering up, and he's going to be a good man and save the monster, and he's identifying with the monster, and we're getting flashbacks of, you know, how he's identifying with the monster. And so he goes to save it, and it transitions into 15's excellent theme. That was cool. I really liked that. That was like a great Doctor Who moment, Murray Gold moment, great Doctor characterisation moment. Saving the ugly monster and identifying with the ugly monster. I really liked that. There was other stuff in the episode too.
I think it doesn't help that the second half of the episode, once we get into chasing the bogeyman around, it is really confined to these quite boring-looking corridors, this kind of really weirdly brightly lit kind of corridors as well. It's not really very scary, and it's not very visually exciting, so it does feel like the episode gets bogged down to a huge degree. And then, of course, in the first half, you've also got the Doctor wandering around doing this sort of half-assed version of End of the World at the start of the episode as well. So kind of going through the usual beats with, oh my god, we're in the future, humanity survived, there's aliens, let me sonic your phone, in a way that feels a little bit half-hearted. There's this, almost this feeling, slight feeling of unease, like RTD has this job to exposit all this stupid garbage and doing the requisite introduction stuff. But the thing is, it doesn't really have that job. That's a job you've invented for yourself. You don't have to actually, you know, have the Doctor explain, this is my sonic screwdriver, it does this. I am from the Time Lords, my planet is called Gallifrey. Like, who gives a shit? Like, I know, you know, this is stuff that you will probably have to tell the audience eventually, but you have to dump it the way, like, when we find out he has 2 hearts, right? He just randomly brings that up, and Ruby acknowledges it, and then we move on. And it's like, why do it like that? You know, if you're going to bother to tell us this in the first place, you could find a more interesting way to do it. So, for example, you know, the Doctor having 2 hearts. Earlier on in the episode, he's cuddling all these babies, right? What if one of them, like, could feel like 2 heartbeats in his chest or something? That would be so much more interesting of a way to exposit something like that. So there are always creative opportunities to do things that seem to get slightly abandoned or, like, missed in this episode.
But, do you remember in 2018, I think we complained that Chris Chibnall was kind of dragging out the introducing aspects of the show thing into multiple episodes. He was dragging out the TARDIS stuff into episode 2. Why? So that was bad, but it's also bad to put it all in the premiere sort of episode. How do we square that circle?
Well, the answer is that Chibnall bad, RTD bad, Moffat good. We should just do it exactly how Moffat did it.
I think it's not even so much that you. It's not a matter of choosing between dragging it out and condensing it. You can just not do it. Like, you can just get on with the story. You don't need to do the whole kind of here's the lesson in Doctor Who for all you new fans. Like, no, they just watch the show and pick it up as they go along.
I think Series 11 and Season 1 here are actually doing the exact same thing I really dislike, and it's this self-conscious explanation where I don't. It's like you were saying. Why do we need this to be explained? Like the Sonic Swiss Army knife monologue in The Woman Who Fell to Earth irritated me so. Why? It's a magic doohickey. You don't. It's more interesting if you don't. She was over-explaining it so much that it just sucked all the magic out of it. And here, I don't think it's to that extent exactly, but I'm just confused because Rose didn't do this. The episode Rose, the 11th Hour, didn't do this. They kept magic by, it's interesting how we're not explaining everything, right away. And I think the Church at Ruby Road did that a lot better as well. So it's just a weird reflex to start explaining. I don't mind the timeless Gallifrey lore so much because that's tying into the actual themes of the episode and that's kind of connecting to the babies and that's connecting to Ruby. I'm fine with that. It's like the random explaining the TARDIS and the hearts and the name and everything. It's quite a lot for the episode.
I do think it was as bad as the Sonic Swiss Army knife bit. The name stuff is what particularly annoyed me because it's how do I say this? Just the way that it's done is so kind of half-hearted and strange and non-committal and not actually like really linked to the history of the show. It's this kind of this like middle weird ground where it wants to explain the lore, but it also doesn't want to explain the lore. So it's explaining like barely related stuff, like there's a character named the Rani, and is this like at all important? Like, what? How is that? Why is that what you need to tell the audience? Like in the first episode, of all the things,
it's in this weird position between apologetic and wrongly proud. It's in this weird halfway space. Like it's kind of awkward and like it knows what it's doing is cringe, but it feels like there's this weird compulsion to do it anyway. Like, we're Doctor Who fans. Doctor Who is so quirky. We've got the Rani and we've got the Gallifrey and all of this, but we can't actually take any of it seriously because that would be cringe, right? So it's this weird thing. It's this hybrid. Neo, you mentioned magic earlier. And actually, something we brought up in Ruby Road as well was the idea that it wasn't selling the magic of the TARDIS or stuff like that very well. And one kind of possible explanation for that was maybe that they're hoping that magic will come from other sources. And maybe that is almost kind of continuing here, like tossing off the stuff about Gallifrey in such a lazy way as they do at the start of this episode. Maybe that is almost done in the hope that we're going to be going into this other realm with all this Pantheon, Timeless Child stuff. Maybe that will serve to substitute for the mystique that is kind of missing from the Time Lords and Gallifrey at this point. Like maybe that's kind of, well, that doesn't excuse making it boring like this, but it might kind of provide an insight into what the engine is here that's producing the boringness. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I like a lot of the, I mean, we've talked about this in the Yonder discussion as well, but I really chill with how a lot of the timeless stuff is being played. I think because RTD is coming at it at such a thematic way, like he's paralleling it to stuff in the episodes. He's written a companion that's kind of tying into what he's trying to do with the Doctor here. He's rejigged it in subtle little ways to make it very meaty with the characterization. I am actually impressed with him in that regard. I think he's done some really almost Moffat-esque like lore hackery to turn a strange addition of continuity into the show into this kind of fruit that he's pulling character stuff out of. I'm really impressed by that in a lot of ways. It's just there's lots of other things I'm skeptical of, but I think how he's shifted the Doctor into the adopted kind of stance there, he's pulling a lot from that, and that's working for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really impressive. And the thing that impressed me is like ever since that episode aired, The Timeless Children, I was like, there's no way. There's nothing good to come out of this. How could you spin this in a good way?
But there was a way.
How he's kind of like twisted it on its head that it's like, I'm the last of my kind. I'm an adopted, like I don't know who my family is, and that's like so many other people. It's like Ruby, it's like the Space Babies. It's just a very common spinning this like chosen one singular narrative on its head.
He's inverted it. Yeah, now it's like everyone can identify, no one grew up wrong. It doesn't matter where we come from. RTD's like, he's spun it the complete opposite way where instead of, I know Chibnall wasn't trying to make the Doctor, this individualistic godhead, but that's kind of what he did. But I love how Russell's twisted on its head, and now it's the Doctor identifying with the babies or people watching. Anyone who's blah 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 blah. Yeah, really impressive stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the important part about it is that this is a story that like the people watching can latch onto emotionally. Yeah. We resonate with like nobody grows up wrong, or like I don't fit in the universe and stuff like that. But no one could fit in with like you were the timeless child, you were outside a portal, and blah 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 blah.
I really dislike this episode, but there is a baseline competency to
definitely
like how the monster and the babies tie into the characterization material 15 and Ruby discuss at the start of the episode, which ties into what it seems like the series is doing overall with the adoption stuff and everything. There's just a kind of thematic tightness. It's not very, very tight, but there's something, everything's kind of cohering, in some degree there, which is just something that I guess it's nice to have TV doing that, even in the bad episodes, so to say. I have an issue that's not really with any of the front of a line writing stuff that we're talking about. I can maybe explain this with a musical metaphor more. Star Wars, original Star Wars films, and maybe the prequels, I don't know. Lots of super iconic scenes with super iconic music, right? Luke looking out at the binary sunset, the ending of Empire Strikes Back, the throne room fight in Return of the Jedi. Really easy to remember the music from these moments, right? The scenes have lots of room. When Luke looks out at the sun, that's held for ages. And so John Williams has all the time in the world to, really impressed with the music there. Sequels, it's obviously John Williams again. Editing style has changed a lot by the 2015 onwards. There's way less memorable music in the sequels, and I see some people try and say it's because John Williams is old or whatever. I don't actually think it's that. I think it's that everything's cut so fast and there's so much less breathing room that it's kind of like, well, where would he put it? Where is the 100 seconds that he could swell up a hugely iconic thing? I remember Ray sliding around at the planet in the first one. I remember had a nice Harry Potterish bit of music I can remember, because that's one of the few bits that's felt like it breathed for a long time. You know what I mean? You can probably see where I'm going here. Mm-hmm. Space Babies, I mean, Murray did jam some cool stuff here and there, but why was everything so fast? Like these, if you compare things to The End of the World or Beast Below, like the episode's kind of asking you to, there's so much room in those episodes, in those scenes. If you go back to back and you watch some of the End of the World-esque conversations here, the End of the World ones are so much longer, and there's just room between the lines for the actors and everything. Here, everything is really, really fast. What's going on there?
And it's weird because it's fast, but it's not actually in service of that much. It's a really scant story. But I guess it's that this plot doesn't really lend itself to that many interesting or iconic big scenes where we can hold. I guess maybe the Disney dinosaur scene at the beginning could have done a Jurassic Parky thing, or we could have held longer on the scene of the big window opening and seeing space. But
yeah,
like Gig said earlier, a lot of this takes place inside a crummy old spaceship, and there's only so much you can do with that.
Yeah. I think RTD, during the script, he maybe seems kind of bored with the setting almost the moment we get into it. I think there was a way that, for example, the way that during that initial exposition, as the Doctor and Ruby are kind of pouring their way around it for the first time, the way we constantly get them just sort of filling space with garbage, the Doctor keeps going, push the button, push the button again. Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into the problem with that much later, but that pace of it, and the lack of the unwillingness to actually find wonder in where they are. Because, the production designers have done a great job in making those creepy test tube babies floating around and stuff. But on the whole, it really is just treated like a generic, like a blank, just sort of archetypal space station thing. And there's not a great deal of interest had in that. So that's why we don't really have those moments much for Ruby to actually sink in, oh my fucking God, I'm in space, I'm in the future. Because this is also different to her, but not much of that really sinks in. I think the only time they really try anything like that is when they open the window, and weirdly her response is, oh my God, mankind survived, rather than I'm in fucking space. So there's this weird this weird alignment of what's actually being focused on. I think it just comes from disinterest in what the material setting is.
I remember the start of World Enough in Time, well, not the cold open, but the regular start. I remember the music super clearly, and I can remember the shot really clearly, because it's this long tracking VFX shot when we're looking at how long the colony ship is, and the show really milks that. And so it really kind of sits in your mind, wow, that's a really interesting thing we're looking at here. And Murray's, really emphasizing that. Here, I don't think the space station is interesting to the degree the huge colony ship was, but I just don't feel like we're milking much of it as much as we could be. And you might say, well, it's not that interesting enough to milk, but maybe it would have been if we milked it. You know, we're going so fast. I don't know if we're giving everything a huge chance to be super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the whole vibe of that end of the world, like, station or whatever that they're on, like, I mean, it's such a memorable, like, location, like, set, scenery. I think partly that is because of the character of the place and the people inside it. So you've got all these, like, rich, you know, elites kind of fraternizing for this big gathering, and that almost kind of informs the, like, far out, like, design of where they are, like, just the vibe of the whole place, and it sinks in a lot. You know, it's really cool. There's nothing like that done with the baby ship. It really is just treated as like, there's no really attempt to make the station itself like an interesting, unique place. It's just full on business like, we just want to get this out of the way, here's a generic Doctor Who space station, right? And that's a problem.
Something I did like was when 15's giving his speech, one of his speeches about Gallifrey, when he's saying he doesn't have a home, he just has freedom. You know, that's all nice. It's kind of generic Doctor things, but he says something I really liked there, where he says he doesn't have a purpose. And I love that. I think that Doctor characterization shifts there in both classic and New Who, and well, I guess Disney Who now. Is he just an idiot, a madman in a box, or is he sorting out fair play throughout the universe? You know, what is he exactly? I really like, and I think this builds off the giggle and the bi-generation and kind of divesting from the 14's trauma and everything. I love the idea that 15 is just, he's not going out to fix everything necessarily. He's just free. And I think that's a really, really inviting, winning characterization that really suits how Ncuti's playing the role. I liked that bit of dialogue a lot. I think that's a sort of Doctor characterization I really like.
Yeah, it's the right way to go after Twice Upon a Time when he was like, oh, the universe needs me to live. Oh, it sucks, but I'll just do it anyway. So it's totally the right move to just... I mean, I worry, of course, because the more you have the Doctor saving the universe, the more it tends to creep back in, almost. Like, my job is to save the universe. But that kind of sucks, because then it just starts to become about that and less about the Doctor as a human being. Not a human being. a being, a character, with their own role and their own like motives and their own things they want to do. So I hope we can stay in this place where the Doctor doesn't feel like he has like he's the fucking universal caretaker and he's just a guy. But like, I don't know how well we'll actually stay there.
Yeah, for the time being, just this intergalactic sort of tourist hanging out. It's I agree. It's really nice, and it's a good change of pace for the show, and it's a good direction to go in. It is going to be interesting when the Pantheon show up properly and how that's all going to work. But yes, for the moment, it's very nice.
There's a lot of emphasis put on that at the end as well, when the Doctor talks to Ruby and says, no job, no boss, just fun. And RTD always talks about how it's amazing that the Doctor doesn't have to pay taxes. Amazing. Imagine a hero who doesn't have a job. So that feeling of joblessness, of just freedom being disattached, it seems to be something he really wants to emphasize this time around.
It reminds me of how in his first era there was a lot of stuff on how like the Doctor can save these humans from their boring lives of taxes and jobs, and now instead of just the Doctor saving the companion, he's doing that too, like very loudly. I don't have a job, everybody, look at me.
We're being too positive. Here's another negative thing. When they're in like the cave of the monster and they're working out where the monster came from and how the ship is how the station is working and how it's all going, was I just really off the episode at this point and like inclined to be critical, or was that not great how that was written, that scene where they're just kind of babbling at each other, and because it was literal, it did this, and it literally did this and the machine was literal, so therefore it did this, but then that means the machine did this. Like, I'm not talking about the actual pun of, the bogeyman or where it is, just the whole way that information was revealed. Am I being super nitpicky, or did you guys find that weird as well? Just how they were babbling at each other. The machine did it, and the machine did it, and that's why the machine did.
Okay, I think it would work better if there was an actual point being made there in their conversation. I think if the part it's a dual problem. Like, one hand you're just doing babble exposition, but on the other hand also, like, what are you expositing? Like, there's no actual reason given for why the fuck this machine created a monster to scare the children. Why would it need to do that? It's supposed to be a birth machine, right? It creates babies. Like, who the fuck programmed it in to also make like a like a horrifying demon in the basement? I mean, there's not much of a point there, and it's one of those things where like the actual logic of the thing is just skipped over, and almost, in fact, the exposition of the premise is there instead of the actual premise. That's weird. It's an interesting stylistic kind of quirk where you have the act of babbling the supposed logic covers for the lack of any logic underneath.
I think that is what the point of the babbling is, to sort of paper over that. Instead of like, because it doesn't make sense. Like, you're right, but like if they keep saying enough times, oh, because the machine, it's the same machine at the top and the bottom, and so the machine, and there were stories, and there's a baby, and it's just enough to like hand wave it along.
Yeah.
Something that I find really funny in a kind of pathetic way, like earlier on in the episode when Ruby, it's really foregrounded how Ruby, works out. It's like a children's story. I worked it out. I'm so clever. I've passed my companion test. And when it gets brought up again later on, she's like, see, I knew all along. It was a children's story. That's so smart. It feels like, it feels like that's RTD sort of, insisting that I totally gave Ruby like a focus and like a thing to do in the story. Like totally, she has her companion arc. She's just like Rose, bro. She's proven herself, and it doesn't really wash because it's like, her contribution there is actually nothing. She hasn't actually like contributed very much to the story. It's not a very important thing that she figured out there. So it just feels like it is compensating for something. Yeah,
it's just a coincidence. She's noticed a coincidence.
Oh yeah, well, there you go. That's a coincidence, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
And the goblins come back and breathe some life into this episode. Get the goblins eat these babies too.
Why was the episode ends so strangely? The roof gets cracked, and in like RTD mode, it matters like how and where people live and money and everything. So, and remember in the last episode, there was damage to that flat as well, and so now we've got more damage to the flat, and we just kind of end there. And not to get into the next episode, but the Doctor was just talking in the TARDIS about his name, and I felt like the priorities were weird in there. I guess this is more a complaint with the next episode not following up maybe, but that was odd to me.
I feel like the priorities are weird all over this episode.
Yeah.
It's like every decision made is very questionable, but yeah, you're right. It ends very randomly.
I love the shot of the snow in the TARDIS, and I like the whole cracks in time, snow, Ruby, church arc. Like I think that's a cool visualization and everything, but it's just I really like how the Sundays were set up in the last episode. It's so just weird to damage the flat and kind of play it as a gag, and then we kind of shoot it weirdly, the name thing, and then we move on. I just find the ending a bit weird.
Yeah, it's as much as the family was so well set up last week, it feels like this week they're in here just almost for perfunctory reasons. Like why? Yeah, it just feels very. I mean, I love Ruby like declaring to the Doctor, we're going to go see my mum right now. Like, that's lovely.
That was sweet.
But like then we just divert away from that and get this weird kind of crowbar together of the Doctor taking a long time to introduce himself and then walking out the TARDIS before we hear the end of the sentence. And then, of course, we get the arc thing with he scanned Ruby. So it's just things that don't really fit together, and just it's tonally a bit, it's messy, I think is the way to describe it. It's just quite messy. And it's not the only spot that's messy in the episode either.
Pulling from the end of the world and the beast below and that sort of thing is derivative, but that's not necessarily bad because they're good episodes and they make sense for this first/second story. But doing the exact same scene as Series 6 with the scanning the companion thing was, I did not like that. I like that RTD2 is pulling from Moff, like even though it was clunky, and it was like a fairy tale made true with the monster, whatever was, kind of, it felt very Moff-esque, but that was the exact same scene as scanning Amy.
I'd say it's actually worse. It's slightly worse. It's not the exact same scene.
It was way worse.
Yeah, because in Series 6, right, when the Doctor scans Amy's pregnancy, that's kind of interesting because she's just insisted to him that I'm not pregnant. Sorry, I was mistaken. So the Doctor's still pursuing it, and he doesn't really believe her. He thinks something else is going on. And so then when we don't get that question of, is she pregnant like she said before, or is she not pregnant like she just said now? And we don't know which it is because we don't see the result. And it's kind of like, And of course, the eventual answer to that is a pretty fucking good answer, if we're honest, with the flesh and all that. So, like, there's just so much more going on in that version. And here we get, like, the notes without the song, almost. It's just a really flatter version. Is she human? Ooh, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, whatever. Okay. Because, I mean, with the whole what is Ruby and the Doctor trying to investigate Ruby, that, again, is another Moff, like, riff. It's the impossible girl with Clara all over again. Or maybe, like, what's going on with Amy and the crack in her bedroom and all that. It's that brought back. And it is fun to see RTD doing these, like, Moff 1... like homages, like rip-offs, but like I want him to do them in a way that's also interesting and not just kind of half-hearted.
What is interesting is that with Moffat we got Snow That Remembers, and now we've got Remembers That Snow.
I will say about the first snow scene, when they start talking about the church, and immediately the Doctor is sucked into memory land, and the figure points at him, and suddenly there's snow in the spaceship. The whole sequence, maybe it was carried by this quite subtle thing, that Gold started doing with the music. Once we snap back to the ship, there's this kind of groaning, kind of like brass that kind of comes in, and this like throbbing heartbeat like percussion. I think I said before, like the gold moments I tend to notice are the smaller ones rather than the larger ones. And that kind of stuck out because it felt like we jaunted into a slightly different show. Maybe a show with a bit more tension to it. And I think that whole sequence where the Doctor and Ruby are staring at each other, kind of transfixed in fear, like, what the fuck is actually happening around us right now? Like, I loved Millie's performance there. I loved, like, the intimacy of it and just, like, the dread and the juxtaposition of quite tranquil imagery of snow with the suggestion of something really powerful that's actually terrifying. I think I found that really fun. I mean, I like that whole scene. So I found that more than welcome. It did feel like there was in the middle of this whole baby, kind of sloppy sort of, drunken excitement. I liked that injection of sort of tension and mystery.
Yeah, I loved it too. I think we've spoken a lot about how messy and uninformed and questionable a lot of the choices in this episode have been, but not that one. That felt very considered and thought out, and it was pulled off really well.
Should we talk about the babies?
Yeah.
I will say on rewatch, I found them adorable. I think the babies are actually quite cute. That's the thing, because they're babies at the end of the day. I say the problem is that the voice direction with them, I mean, even before we get to the weird CGI lip sync, I think the way that the babies sometimes sound like they're not like in the scene, like Eric in particular, like when he's like announcing, "Oh my god, guys, it's mummy and daddy," he says it like, "Look everyone, it's mummy and daddy."
Yeah.
Really, really bored. I was like, what? And then of course I found out that they got actual kids to voice the babies, which I mean, obviously it's difficult to kind of like direct or act like as a kid or for a kid. So I mean, so that makes it a bit more sympathetic, but also it's like, I think it hurts a lot of the scenes with the babies. One interesting detail is that apparently they were going to have Lenny Rush voice like I guess the lead baby or one of the babies, and you can hear him kind of maybe doing a bit of it at the read through or somewhere in one of the behind the scenes things. But of course they liked him so much they promoted him, and now he's playing a completely different character in a later episode. And the trouble is he sounded really good, so I think he'd have been quite good. And we lose him and we get actual kids instead, which sound much worse. So that doesn't help.
I like Eric because I think it's just funny how he looks so. How would you describe? He looks so displeased, and the voice kind of works with that. I think he's funny, and I like that Poppy 15 dialogue about the adoption and the growing up wrong or not wrong sort of thing. But I don't want to make too much of a thing of this because I think it's a very fan brain thing, and everyone's talking about it. But the whole "what will the newbies think?" What will the new people think of watching the show? You know why I think that's a really stupid topic is because the people discussing what will the newbies think of the show are like the Doctor Who fan podcasts. We're the least qualified to talk about it. We're not the newbies discussing the show. There's no one worse to listen to on that topic than people like us or the other podcasts and blogs covering that. So I think it's a very circular sort of thing where everyone's just kind of strawmanning and imagining that. Well, I reckon a Disney viewer would think this. Well, I reckon they would think it's very amaterial, as our friend Oliver would say. But the one thing I want to say, maybe on that note, is the CGI of the babies' mouths, which Doctor Who Unleashed was very proud of and was showing it off and talking it up. It's not very good, is it?
Oh, it's terrible.
It's very Sea Devils, Legend of the Sea Devils, warping their faces a little bit. Yeah.
I would happily show a not we friend Rose the episode, and if they eye rolled at the bin CGI or the plastic Mickey or whatever, I'd be like, yeah. But that's still a really, that stuff doesn't look great, but it's a very strong episode in lots of ways and, everything. But this episode, maybe this is nothing wrong with Space Babies, the episode. Maybe this is my insecurity or something. But I would not show someone this episode. And one of those reasons is those mouths. I would much rather show them the bin.
I think you just made the point, right? Rose is a stronger episode all around, right? And that's why you would show it. I think, because it kind of got ahistorical, the whole discourse around which episode should you start with, which episode will scare off newbies. And even though Rose obviously worked to introduce loads of newbies to the show, we got this discourse about, oh no, Rose is embarrassing, it's cringe, it's got the CGI, blah, blah, blah. But, that's ridiculous because obviously Rose has so much going on for it. And I think in Space Babies, like we talked about before, it's not really even the first episode, even though it is the first episode of the season, it's the first episode since Christmas. It's not like, like, I mean, on Disney Plus, as we've learned now, they've done it as a 3-episode premiere format. So they've moved Special 4 has now been recreated as season 1, episode 1 on Disney Plus. So that is technically the first episode. Now, I think as a first episode, I mean, we talked about this for Ruby Road as well, but I think that's okay. I mean, it's better than Babies as an introduction, because it's just got more going on with it. It's got Ruby's family introduced. So, you know, this Babies thing, I think something like the lips, the CGI lips, it casts more of a shadow if the rest of the episode isn't kind of pulling its weight.
Yeah.
I think one of the big problems, apart from just like the problem that it's bad, is that a lot of the emotion and interest of the episode rests on these things that weren't pulled off very well. It's like, it's one thing for the bin to be like meh or like scaring off people in rows, because the episode's not about the bin. It's like one tiny little bit.
Yeah.
But Space Babies is all about the Space Babies, and if the Space Babies aren't right, then like it doesn't matter how good the rest of the episode is, because this is predominantly Space Babies. And so yeah, having them be like so front and center and so integral is the thing that kills it.
Rather than having one moment you have to just dismiss and move on from, it's constantly coming back like throughout the episode. Like, oh yeah, here's the baby looking like shit again. Here's the baby sounding like shit again. Oh, dear.
Which is probably the biggest questionable decision for me, which is was this a good enough idea to make if you couldn't do it perfectly? And I don't know if it was. I
guess I kind of had this vision that RTD's been away for 13, 14 years, so he's been gestating, right? It doesn't make any sense, but he gestated series 1 for 2005. But even did he? I'm kind of projecting this image on him. You know, like how a lot of bands, their first album's so good because they've spent so many years workshopping that material. And then their second album, they're like, well, we have a year or two to make this one. And it's like much worse. I guess that's kind of the vision, I guess, I'm subconsciously projecting on a series 1. And I guess season 1 was, well, there was loads of time. Therefore, it's going to only be the good ideas and the ideas that have, you know, really bubbled up and developed over time. I don't even know if series 1 necessarily worked that way. I'd have to, maybe, I don't know. That's another discussion. But season 1, I guess subconsciously, I just kind of thought, well, RTD, you know, and he must have had loads of ideas in the intervening decade plus. So we're only going to get great ideas in the season. But this was like, it's not a none idea like some Chibnall episodes. There is an idea here. I get the adoption, mixing with Ruby, the Doctor, and the babies, and the monster. Like, it all kind of, it works. But you know what else works is a lot of the new series adventures, those books that very few people read. They tend to work. Like, they have an actual story and a plot, and you can read them, and they're not terrible. But they're also like, a lot of them, no one would make that on TV, right? No one would make that for the actual TV. Look, I love a lot of those books. Well, I love some of those books, but do you know what I mean? It's not that they work as stories, but they're not quite. There's a reason they're not on TV, right? There's a reason those writers aren't the TV writers. There's a reason those stories aren't getting produced on TV. Space Babies kind of feels like that to me. Like it works as a story, and you can tell a real writer wrote it. But was this worthy of production?
It has the qualities of idea and theme that you would expect from like a filler story. Like, we need to fill a slot, but it's put in this position of extreme prominence. It's Ruby's first adventure in the TARDIS. So that is just strange. It's a strange alignment. And when you have so few episodes, it's like, why are we even doing this, you know? Why aren't you like pushing the boat out and doing like, trying to make this the best thing fucking ever, you know, every week? So it's just weird that this episode kind of exists. It feels like you could skip it as a thing. It feels like you could skip this episode and not lose very much.
And in seasons this short, I'm getting way ahead of ourselves here, but like, can you imagine a future where someone's like, well, yeah, you got to watch Church, and then of course you got to watch Boom, and then you should watch 73 Yards. Then they hesitate, then they say, and I guess the finale, but then you get onto season 2. Like, that's with these short episode orders, it feels so more critical when an episode kind of misses, because it's not like we have 13 or 14 episodes or even 10 episodes a season anymore. Shorter and shorter orders and very centralized writer turnouts. It just feels like a bigger deal when an episode doesn't fully work. Like, imagine The Idiot's Lantern if series 2 was like 6 episodes.
Imagine New Earth if series 2 was 6 episodes. That was the first one. In fact, imagine most episodes of series 2. It was 6 episodes, yeah.
Even just as it is. Yeah, it's just a big conflation of, not conflation, it's just a big group of things all happening at the same time that make Space Babies, which isn't actually, like, it's not horrible, but, like, it's one of the first episodes. It's kind of an introduction, but not really. It's one of only 8 episodes we're getting. It shouldn't feel as fillery and uneventful and kind of messy as it does. It shouldn't feel messy.
There was a stylistic... we were talking about similarities and differences with RTD1. There's a difference that I hate, which is... and RTD1 sometimes did... Moff sometimes did this. It's not a thing the show's never done before, but I don't like how the new era is doing it with such intensity. The flashbacks to scenes in the same episode. So presumably most people are watching episodes in one sitting. And so, hey, you idiot, remember 10 minutes ago when this happened? I really hate that. I remember the first episode of The Wire, which is famously a very non-patronizing show, 99% of the time. The first episode ends with one of those things, a flashback to earlier in the episode, and the showrunner hated putting that in, and I agree that it's a crap way to end the first episode, and so it puts the show in the wrong tone. This here, the one that I think kind of works is the musical montage that the monster is like me. I relate to the monster. That one kind of works because it's kind of in technical or stylistic service of what that scene's kind of doing. But the other ones, like, remember the nose blowing? It's like, yeah, I'm not a fucking moron. Yes, I remember that. It was like 20 minutes ago. Like, what's the expectation here that I forgot? Like, I really hate that. The pacing, I don't know why stuff's been cut so fast. I don't want to run to RTD's pandering to the Zoomers because I feel like that's a very... there's a lot of assumptions going into that, why it's edited differently to how New Who was edited. But the flashback thing really annoys me because I don't see any... like, the nose one it pissed me off. I rolled my eyes. I think that sucks.
I am partially the inverse of your position on this, because on the nose-blowing one, they do a kind of match cut when we go straight from the tissue going into the pipe to snot coming out of the pipe in the present day, and kind of like that visual connection I thought was kind of cute. Whereas like at the climax, when they do that montage, the stuff they include I found strange. Like they also have the Doctor going, "I'm the last of the Time Lords," from the start of the episode, and it's like, well, hang on a minute, because I felt like maybe including some of it I could get, like when we have the new take of him talking to Captain Poppy when it's front on Ncuti's face at the close-up rather than how it was before, and kind of having to repeat that bit about how I'm unique and blah blah blah. That makes sense, but they include so much there, like including the exposition about Gallifrey and stuff in that bit, and I really didn't like that because it's like it's talking down to the viewer, isn't it? It's like and a kind of it's denying us the joy of actually unfolding the story and like watching the story unfold ourselves. It's just telling us like, okay, these are all the things, absolutely every last thing in the episode that is relevant to this. Here's a laundry list. We're not going to let you use your brain. We're not going to let you like see like the Doctor putting this together in his mind, like just through Ncuti's acting or just through something the Doctor says, like clicks it all together. We're not going to have that moment of magic, that spark. No, it's going to be this like business like listing off of clips. It's really bad, and it reminds me of something actually. To get a bit wanky here, there's a Q&A that Benny Safdie did for the finale of The Curse, right? And and that episode is kind of like cryptic and strange, but when he's asked about it, he kind of uses this analogy of a drawer with no handle. So if you have a drawer and there's no handle on the drawer, how would you open it? Would you tip the drawer forward? Would you just slide in the knife and pry it open? Would you put some tape on it and pull it out? You'd come up with a lot of different ways to find the same information, but the way you got that information was your own. Whereas if there's a handle on the drawer, you just pull it open, you lose that process of searching. And I think his point basically there is that in the process of trying to understand a bit of a story, you understand the story more, almost, or you understand something more, you understand things more. It's more interesting that way. And this whole we will just like a lecturer, we will just tell you all the relevant clips and we will just pound it into your brain. This is the point we're making, and we're not going to let the characters tell the story themselves. That's denying us the pleasure, and that's making it boring. So that's the problem here.
Yeah,
it makes me think there are some flashbacks I think have worked so well on the show, and pretty much every example I can think of that I love has been one where the key element of it was that it was a surprise, or like it was unpredictable. Like the flashback in The Girl Who Died is really surprising because it's from a whole different era of the show, and it's not like a scene that felt like it was connecting to what was happening. But then when it happens, you're like, oh, that it kind of links up different things in your brain, and then you kind of get that pleasure of making the connection kind of yourself of what's going on. The Series 8 finale, when the Doctor's kind of having a self-revelation moment, some of the clips used there are more on the nose than others, but like the Robot of Sherwood one, I've always thought it didn't feel to me like that moment of that episode was doing a big arc thing. But then when it's kind of put in context of the Doctor trying to work himself out, it kind of reframes the bend of that season to me to kind of click things together more. And that was a really pleasant thing for me. But in this episode, it's like the flashbacks are so on the nose. It's like, I'm relating to the monster. Here are 3 things to show why I relate to the monster. It's not really like you aren't making half the connection. It's doing all the connecting for you. And when I think of all the great flashbacks in the show, they tend to be the ones where you kind of go, oh, rather than just like it connecting straight away, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you see something in a new light. That means you actually do the seeing yourself. They present it to you in a new light, and then you actually understand what it being in a new light means. And there's none of that here, because it happened like half an hour ago, and it means the exact same thing it did then.
Yeah, it belies like a lack of confidence in the viewer. So I think I agree a little more with Gig in that the snot nose one, I was not like annoyed or offended by that one, because it was just such a little thing. It didn't bother me, because it was like they'd already explained the whole thing and figured it out via words, and it was like a really logical thing. It wasn't like providing new information and trying to like inform a specific reading. It was just like, oh, this is a little bonus bit of
grossness
evidence for that. Oh yeah, and grossness and humor is like the flashback to the blowing the nose wasn't telling the story. So it wasn't trying to be a big flashback moment. It was just like a fun cutback. But the bit with at the end where the Doctor remembers half an hour ago and it's the big emotional climax fell very flat, because yes, we know.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's odd the thought that you would need to explain why the Doctor feels like compassion for this creature through flashbacks. Like, come on, like it's not that big of a question. You need to answer it with funny editing.
I know we're nitpicking here, but the relationship you're cultivating with your audience is a huge part of how a show works. And we've seen how RTD's cultivated that relationship before. And it's a big question, like, how is season 1 differing or not differing from New Who? We have some of the most insane Wikipedia arguments I've seen in my life, centering around, is this a different show or is this not a different show? So when it is doing something different, I think it's worth like interrogating whether it's good or bad. And this is different to what New Who was doing, this flashback within the same episode thing. So I feel like it's one of the more interesting things to unpack, because it's not something we could unpack in most RTD 1 episodes. So that is interesting.
Maybe it's another self-conscious thing, because that keeps coming up, doesn't it? This self-consciousness about like what it's doing with exposition, what it's doing with tone, and maybe almost this compulsion to edit back in, make sure no one misses anything. Maybe that's part of it. It's coming in the editing suite, like, oh, we don't want to let them miss that. We've got to edit it back in. Just give a bit of a touch, just make it really clear. It's just that this weird kind of almost nervous energy, like racking the show.
This is something very commented on by others. There is an angle I'm kind of interested in here, though, is obviously there's like social commentary in the episode. Government closed down the baby station because of the recession, but the law says you can't stop the births from happening. So we have babies getting born and no one to take care of them. You can make the connection. Like Ruby says, oh, that's not so strange. And the refugee thing, like, oh, they'll take care of the refugees, but the refugees have to physically, they won't go out. And so there's social commentary going on here. I don't want to plumb all that forever, because lots of people will have the same conversations on that. But there is one angle on it I think is interesting, in that I've seen some people humoring this and some people shutting it down instantly, going, well, let's kill the moon this a little bit, in that the episode seems to be, pro-choice and we help the babies, and, we shouldn't just honor life in the abstract, we should honor the actual material lives and help every life. But is the episode making a boo-boo? Is it doing what another era often did, and it's telling the exact opposite moral that it's intending to? Am I making sense there, or am I just floating around who wants to unpack that more?
Is this basically about people saying that by stopping Jocelyn from killing the monster, the Doctor is actually being anti-abortion?
Yeah.
Because that's an argument I've seen floated.
Yes, I've heard that too.
I will say it does not make any sense, because the creature, it's not in anyone's womb. It's already been born. It's already been alive for 6 years. It's 6 years old. So this is more a question of murdering like a sort of... I think the reason people have been shutting this line of argument down is that there's not much to it, I think. It just kind of falls apart under the slightest scrutiny.
Yeah, I don't disagree. RTD makes weird commentary sometimes, but I don't really... It's just got the vague air of, well, have you considered it this way? But when you do, it doesn't really make sense. At least kill the moon. I think you can at least have the argument. I think a lot of the arguments are wrong, but I think there is a kind of an argument there because there is some opaqueness with some of it. But here, yeah, I don't really get what they're saying.
Yeah, there's enough ambiguity with Kill the Moon, whereas a story like this kind of frustrates ambiguity, at least in thematic terms.
Yeah.
And there's some ambiguity about why are the babies like this? Like, why have they not grown physically if it's been 6 years? Like, there's exposition that sounds like it's meant to explain it, but doesn't. Like, the doctor goes, oh, but the birth machine's still running, so you guys grew up but stayed the same size. And it's like, that doesn't answer anything, doctor. It doesn't make any sense. What do you mean? Why would this happen? What does the birth machine do?
Exposition that doesn't explain anything. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's back. Yeah, what is the nature of this birth machine that creates babies that don't grow up? Like, why? It's very strange.
I didn't like the Disney edition scene in the first episode, Church Ruby Road. I don't think it's like an awful scene in a vacuum. I don't like how it sits in the episode. And actually, I don't like the scene that much. It's over-explainy. And I don't like where the doctor is kind of endearing himself to the audience by being, I'm the doctor and I'm so doctory and just let's doctor this whole shit up. You know, aren't I so cool? And I'll read your mind and the sonic screwdriver goes ding. And I don't like those sorts of scenes. One of my favorite things with Paul McGann is how he often gets rid of those sorts of scenes, and then he kind of tries to play them as not those sorts of scenes. I think that's one of the cool things he does. So that I didn't like the Church Ruby Road scene for that reason. The Disney edition one, which was the snowman falling and ping and policeman, she's going to say yes because I'm reading your mind, that sort of thing. Here, the Disney edition was apparently, we see them talk about it at the read-through, so this was a pre-filming thing where it sounds like they said, could you make this episode start in a more exciting way? And from that, Russell came up with the idea of the whole dinosaur butterfly effect gag and all that sort of thing. I thought it was one of the better scenes of the episode in that, like, imagining this episode opening without that sounds pretty grim to me. Like, that's very flat.
Yeah.
And like the gag, you know, it's funny to do a little butterfly effect. Like, it's a nice little surprise, and it's cool to see the VFX and the whole place. And it's a nice first thing for Ruby to see. It's not like the most amazing scene in the world, but I don't feel like it sat oddly. Maybe because it wasn't a reshoot. I don't feel like it sat oddly, like the church one. And yeah, I thought it was a fine scene.
Yeah, it has some delights to it. I think the Doctor kind of having a little moment of joy in life when he resurrects the butterfly and just watches it proudly fly off and all of that. You know, the little bits like that, it feels like it has a nice sense of feeling to it. That means nothing, but it feels nice. And I think the comic beats with Ruby suddenly being replaced by this hectoring kind of posh, like really like angry alien creature. I think it's fun. And the Doctor not knowing like what to say or what to do and it being really awkward all of a sudden. Like, it's funny, it's cute, it's you know, completely harmless, I think. And yeah, if the episode just started with the Doctor hitting the button on the TARDIS and, you know, pushing the button as it were, and then flying off to the baby station, it would be super boring because the baby station stuff starts quite boringly. So yeah, I mean, you can see why Disney gave that note. Like, this episode starts more boringly than the other episodes. What can you do? And, you know, RTD responded to that in a way that's very reasonable. But ultimately, you can see also that this first, this Disney scene doesn't really lead into the rest of the episode in any way.
Yeah.
And actually, there are some small notes of patchwork incoherence as well. Because at the start, before they fly off, the Doctor tells Ruby, this thing flies, want to see? And then when they come out of the TARDIS in Dinosaur Land, the Doctor says, it's called time and relative dimension in space, so we've moved location too. Like, you just told her it flies. Of course it's fucking moved locations. Clearly that's a case where RTD, I think, maybe forgot what he put earlier on in the original script and then wrote this bit, maybe? I don't know, that's kind of how it seems to me.
I didn't notice that. But yes, I also found it very pleasant, very fine. I know that's a lie. It was okay. I have no...
Okay.
I didn't care. I didn't hate it. But I didn't know it was Disney mandated, but it so felt not attached to the episode. It was like, it's so... I didn't even notice the dialogue mistake you pointed out, Gig, but it's so just like disconnected from the Space Baby story. It's like, oh, let's go off and see the dinosaurs for 5 seconds and then have an episode.
It ends really awkwardly as well. The Doctor's just like, let's try again, and just shuffles awkwardly back in the TARDIS.
That was my favourite bit, because that was a bit of interesting characterization for Ncuti. I've never seen his Doctor act like that, where he's like, let's get out of here. Let's try that again. It reminded me of the beginning of Thin Ice, where there's a long moment of just the Doctor and Bill walking down the Thames talking about Pete. That's probably why. But it would be weird if they had that, if the Doctor and Bill had that conversation about Pete in a different place and then went to the frost sphere. So yeah, it was fine. I didn't hate it, but I could clearly see that it was like stuck in late.
You know, though, what it vaguely reminds me of? Maybe there was almost an attempt to imitate that here. Sometimes with Moffat, like maybe at the start of the season, like you'd have a little bit of almost like a mini-sode before the opening titles, almost. Like this sense of, okay, we'll introduce the show by having some antics going on that aren't really part of the main plot. Like, say, Impossible Astronaut, the Doctor's like under someone's skirt, or there's stuff like that.
Yeah.
That would occasionally happen at the start of episodes, but then that would be building up to a big, leading to the opening titles moment where we go, hey, let's go, okay, that's the mini-sode over, it's wrapping up, time for adventure, boom, do-wee-oo. That doesn't happen here, because we don't have a cold open in this episode, interestingly. Weird choice. I mean, maybe that's a product.
Maybe we should have.
Yeah, maybe we should have. Maybe that would help the structure a bit.
Also, it's just reminded me that the dinosaur scene isn't what opens this episode. We pick up, like, the second Church on Ruby Road finished.
I've seen some, like, puzzlement about that, and the fact that the shots of her going into the TARDIS don't match, like, Ruby Road ones. I don't think that matters, I'll be honest. I think my point of view is that what we see here in Space Babies is more of a subjective thing. Like, this is, like, conveying how she, because the camera's really tight to the back of her head and, like, her face, this is more about how she feels walking into the TARDIS. Like, this big lead up, like, oh, it's really dramatic. Less than, like, a literal representation of how she went around the TARDIS in the previous episode. Like, obviously, that's not the point, So I think people kind of fussing about that are kind of off base. But it does suggest that, like, the whole choice to open with that bit, like carrying on from Ruby Road, is kind of like a weird consequence of how awkwardly Ruby Road ended as well, with that whole thing of her doing that, and I'm the Doctor. It's just this weird sort of staggered progression from one to the other, like the two episodes kind of blurring into each other.
I really didn't like it. I didn't like the ending of Church on Ruby Road, and I genuinely think I laughed a little bit when I pressed play on Space Babies and I was like, oh my god.
It's back.
Doing it again.
We get to see it again.
Yeah.
With the same awful shot of the TARDIS as well.
Exactly. I was like, oh, people were complaining about how the shots are different. I was like, well, there's one shot I wish was different.
There is something I like about the episode we haven't really talked about heaps. And I guess this kind of belies a thing I don't... Well, okay. Well, Millie Gibson's great. I liked her in Church, but the new episodes, she's just much more obviously to me how great she is. I don't know if this comparison makes any sense, but I love Matt Smith, and she reminds me so much of Matt Matt got a lot of bad dialogue. He got a lot of it. But you could never tell really with Matt because he was just fizzing and so much energy, and he was just babbling it out, and I didn't see him as an actor. He just really felt like an alien. It felt like the words, but that acting style where it's like it just completely feels like they've got more things to say and the real dialogue is just kind of cutting off other character dialogue they've got inside them. Millie does the exact same thing where it's like she's cutting herself off and just everything feels so characterful and from her, and she's always acting in the backgrounds of shots, and she's not overdoing it, but she's always reacting and acting, and the way she delivers dialogue always makes it interesting. Sometimes later I go, I didn't really like that line, but when she was saying it I did. And just her facial, it's just physicality. I'm really, really, really impressed. And I wasn't, when she was first cast, I thought, well, okay, it's, it seems like Russell, just from the casting alone, it seems like I don't know what he's trying to do here or if it's going to be the most interesting thing in the world. I have no idea who this actress is. In Church, she was pretty good. But the new ones, she's doing what I think is so important for Doctor Who leads, and that's elevating the material. So I'm super happy with her, always really entertained by her. I think she's doing fantastically.
She's incredibly switched on, like, every second. It feels like she has this nervous tension that she's holding inside her whenever the camera's rolling. So, like her every movement, like her every twitch, like her eyes will, like, flick this way, or, like, her head will turn that way, or she'll kind of jerk one way, and as the words kind of burst out of her almost, it's like she's like they're rupturing whenever she says something. She's constantly fizzing, like, on edge, about to, like, flip, or, like, freak out, or, like, ah! I love moments when she explodes, when she blows up, like in this episode, when she realizes that Eric is going out to face the monster because of what she said, she's like, oh my god, it's my fault, and she fucking runs out of there, and then she gets really mad when she's trying to, like, attract the bogeyman. She starts swinging that pipe around. I love that just explosive energy to her that she has all the time, and of course that transfers to the smaller moments moments as well, like the snow scene when the snow starts falling. She's like suddenly really scared, and she gets very quiet, but that same like nervousness, that same tension is still there, like fizzing away. And then of course you get kind of funnier implementations of it as well, like when you get the bogies reveal and she realizes she's been drenched in snot and it's the most disgusting thing ever. You get this is the worst thing that has ever happened to anyone, and it really feels like a young woman like just freaking out and flipping out and being like, don't laugh at me. It's just so much fun, I think, because it's just so much fun to have these characters who feel so alive and who are just doing so much to make things entertaining and fun for you. So I love like having like her performance in the show. She's really good.
Yeah, I love her too. I think that her sort of slightly manic energy is so necessary in the show, and it gives it such this like, especially New Who, especially both RTD and Moffat Who, so like 2/3 of New Who, it's like it's so propulsive almost constantly. There's so much energy to it always, and you need leads that can do that can hold it together, and she does. It's so great to watch. Yeah, she's great.
It's weird, actually, because I think back to previous New Who companions, and I just wonder, how have we ever had someone quite like this before? Because it feels like such a natural and obvious style to kind of do the companion in, and this kind of dynamic, this kind of character who just kind of like bursts a bit like this. Whereas I think back to previous companions, they're always a bit more relaxed about things, almost, like just in the way they talk, the way they act, the way they behave. And it's like, wow, what were we doing? What have we been doing for like 20 years? What's going on? This is clearly how the companion should work. This is like fucking on another level. Obviously, I'm not actually downplaying like past great companions like and performances like Jenna as Clara. Obviously, that's Jenna was she was not doing this at all, but she had a similar level of switched onness, right, in terms of the amount of detail and constant like the rapid pace of how she could switch from one thing to another. But she wasn't doing this kind of zoom kind of like constant like mentally like kind of freaking out performance that Millie is doing as Ruby. It's just that this feels like it just feels such an obvious great choice for a companion, what Ruby is doing now, and I just love that it is here finally.
I really like Ncuti's charisma. I think he's awesome some of the time. I think some of the lines he's just absolutely killing. I think his physicality is awesome, how he moves around. I think his chemistry with Millie is awesome. There's lots I love about him. I think in the giggle he was astonishing, and to upstage David Tennant. And this wasn't like, I know Tennant was trying to do this. It's not like Tennant backed down heaps and shrank himself to make room for the other actor. I feel like Ncuti, I know Tennant was doing that in a way, but I feel like Ncuti tore himself the room, and with the force of his acting, really declared, I am the Doctor. More than you are. I am the Doctor now. In the giggle, I think Ncuti a squillion % nailed that, and that was an incredibly difficult thing to do, and it's a mark of how great of an actor he is. I think he smashed that in the giggle. Church, he did so much stuff I liked as well. Now we've got a couple more hours with him, and we've got hours with, to my taste, less good material with this episode and then the next one. He does a couple of things I don't love. One thing, there's so much technobabble, and a lot of it isn't good. And he kind of delivers it in the same way, where he's doing this affectation of like trying to be super casual through how he delivers. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it, basically. How he delivers his technobabble is like he's trying to toss it off as if it's a super casual thing. And he like does it in the same way a lot of the time. This isn't the worst thing in the world, It's just something kind of annoying. And it doesn't feel... I know Millie's not getting the technobabble lines like he's getting, but when her energy is so naturalistic and fizzy like that, and then he's doing some of the same. I kind of see the strings a bit more, I guess, with his acting sometimes. But he's got the harder job to do, so...
Yeah, I guess he feels like he's sort of throwing himself into the show like a hurricane almost. So when you have moments of like immense like Nicolas Cage like grandstanding and like motion, or moments when he's like back and forthing with Ruby and he's making fun of her for getting snot all over her and he's laughing his head off, and it's so delightful. There's so much fun and kind of joy and kind of like sass and like fizz and craziness there. But I think when you do that, when you get moments of like shittier writing or moments that aren't as good, maybe you lose some of the detail that you would need to actually elevate that stuff. So you don't get as much elevation of the crap stuff. And there's one moment in this episode when they work out that they're in a baby farm and they first go in and it's like, oh, it's a baby farm. He says that with almost the exact same cadence that Tennant was like, oh, it's a sanctuary base in Impossible Planet. He's like, oh, it's a baby farm. And it's like, oh, that knowing, like, oh my God, just not actually making it like just making the world feel small almost in one line and the way you say it. That's actually crazy. And that's the dangerous level of power that a lead actor can kind of have. So it's quite a tricky thing. And also another bad thing that the script does is have the Doctor say space babies so much. He says babies and he corrects himself to space babies. And I think Ncuti actually approaching that, seeing that in the script, I think he must have been like, how the fuck do I make this interesting? Because it's so not interesting at all. So you can see him almost like the wheels turning out, what do I do with this to make it into like anything at all? I think the choice he went with, don't think it quite works, because it's like, why are you doing that? Because he does this thing where he almost seems embarrassed that he said babies instead of space babies every time. Like, I mean, space babies, like, trust me guys, like, it's really strange and it doesn't seem to come from anywhere. So it just feels like an actor trying to fix the script or salvage it somehow, instead of it being like a organic, natural thing that comes from somewhere organic and feels like really thought through, worked through. So it's tough. I think when you have I think it's just a consequence of being so like huge as a performance, as an approach, that the smaller details here and there get kind of lost along the way. And I think that is always the thing that can kind of make or break a Doctor, is like, how do they approach the shit material? Does it just get scooped up? And yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a similar thing. It's he's wonderful with his emotions. He's like, he can really connect to the audience and to the other actors in the scene. And so when he has like regular scenes of just being with Ruby and like, you know, them connecting, that's like it sings. They're brilliant together. But then like it doesn't work when because like there's no emotionality in just random technobabble. And I think we could see a tiny bit of that in the giggle. Do you remember when there was nice stuff between Ncuti and David, and then it kind of didn't work when Ncuti had to ramble off the gods of Ragnarok and
Pandorica, Mavic Chen.
That stuff didn't like work, and I don't blame him. It's hard to figure out like how, like, if you've got like a really like human, like emotionally like aware, like present character, how are you going to say the boring stuff? But yeah, it didn't work for me. A lot of the techno-babbly stuff.
Here's a line reading I don't like, is when he says, "I am the last of the Time Lords." I feel like the energy he puts on that is strange. Do you agree or disagree?
I kind of see what he's going for there a little bit, in the sense of downplaying it. It kind of sounds like he's kind of downplaying it a little bit, or like it's just sort of perfunctory. I think it reminds me of the Pandorica Mavic Chen stuff from Giggle as well. It's kind of like sort of throwing it away a little bit, and I think maybe the idea there, rather than giving it some massive gravity and weight, is that actually he's chill about this stuff now. And maybe that's kind of the idea there. Like, I kind of see like what the idea there is. But like, I kind of hear what you mean as well, the sense of it not really, of it just being a thing, just kind of there, not actually coming from like particular sort of emotions, like not having much emotion attached to it or stuff like that. I get like the issue there. I think what it is, like the broader thing, is that this style of playing the Doctor and behaving as the Doctor is so fresh and new and cool. I want the writing to actually play to that and the strengths of that, and not just do the same old technobabble shit that kind of doesn't really slot into it very well.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that kind of creates this really awkward big thing for Ncuti as well, because he is absolutely singing in these scenes when, like at the end when he gives Ruby the TARDIS key and they just like squee about it basically when she gets it, and they're so happy, and he hugs the TARDIS as well when he's explaining himself, and he's just having so much fun. And you know, I mean, there's lots of stuff in episode 2 as well that's kind of in this vein. That's so cool, and that's so much fun to have, and I just want more of that and less of the fucking whatchamacallit Matrix did the thing, and of course it's a Parthenogenesis machine. Like, that's so boring. Like, I want the show to be new, like in the new way, and not have the old approach cluttering it, so to speak. I guess one big area of the episode we haven't talked about at all is Jocelyn, so NAN-E, basically the mother, sort of mother figure of the babies. I think her, like, she's the only character in this episode besides Doctor and Ruby, and that's important. I think. You could argue she's the only character in either of the first 2 episodes who at least exists separately from like the Doctor and Ruby's kind of world. And she has like an interesting character note, at least sort of semi-interesting, when she explains why she hasn't shown herself to the babies. Because that's kind of a subtle shift in the episode when she says, "I don't want to see them die. I don't want them to see me die." So it's not just, and you know, that's not just like a melodramatic thing. That is a case of, there's something kind of interesting to that. This idea of wanting to both protect the babies from grief, but also protect herself. It's kind of both selfish and sort of wrong-headedly altruistic in a way. I thought that was a funny, interesting little knot there. Like, I wish that had maybe been teased out more. I mean, that could have been like more of a focus for the episode than this whole, like, oh, the bogey monster did this and that. Maybe it didn't help that throughout the second half of this episode, when we cut back to her, it felt like Jocelyn was kind of locked in this one mode when she's putting this really anguished facial expression and she's looking like, oh my god, it's northwest of you. Just go this way. Please do this. It just felt like it kind of backed up the episode even more than it was already backed up from just being stuck in these corridors a little bit. So I think sort of like an okay character, but like not the kind of like knockout that maybe you would want to kind of elevate an episode like this.
Yeah, she had two interesting scenes, because I also think the one at the end where Ruby takes out the Sonic or whatever and stops her from killing the snot monster, and then she breaks down in Ruby's arms. I thought that was a very interesting scene. They're very two like really got a kind of complex emotionally scenes for her at like either end of her existence, and then in between it's just nothing.
Speaking of Jocelyn, I would say there's been a lot of criticism about the repeated NAN-E filter joke and the swearing. I will just say one thing that's kind of one thing that I'm slightly sympathetic to. I think when you do iterations of a joke, they have to be actual iterations, right? And a lot of the iterations of this joke aren't really iterating at all. But the one that I did actually like is when she says the babies, go to the upper level or you have no expletive dinner. I like that she was swearing at the babies that time, because that feels like an actual step, rather than just swearing generally because she's crazy. The fact she's actually swearing at the babies because she's so pissed off with how these fucking babies are acting. That feels like a parenting thing drawn from reality. Like, I mean, like what I'm sure parents, like, they occasionally their baby doesn't understand them. They get fucking annoyed with their babies. Like, fucking hell, So I liked that a little bit, and that felt like a real thing. But yeah, obviously the sheer kind of almost boring repetition of it and keep bringing up the NAN-E filter, that is another symptom of the sloppiness, I think, and maybe the slight just messiness of the episode, not really being very sharp on the repetition of those gags.
The actress is from Bridgerton.
Oh my Bridgerton.
Oh my Bridgerton.
Oh my Bridgerton.
I guess series 1 was super keyed into TV of the time, and I like that it did that, so I can't complain. Sure.
That is a very good point. I mean, we mock the whole Oh My Bridgerton stuff, but I mean, series 1, they had Bad Wolf Station, Weakest Link, all of that was super there. So maybe the modern version of that is Ruby referencing Bridgerton all the time.
Bridgerton, why not?
I mean, who knows? We might get something even more like maybe if later on in the season we have something more like the Bad Wolf game station, more TV meta stuff. Yeah. That would be cool too.
To throw in a couple of quotes, Russell T Davies quotes, things like that to expand or contract our scope around Space Babies a bit. In Doctor Who magazine from February 2024, he said something interesting, which I feel like you guys probably got from the episode, even without hearing him actually spell it out. But what he spelt out was, happy 600 Doctor Who magazine, but let's not look back. We're all dying for the new series, so let's look ahead and see what state the episodes are in, because there's still a lot of work to do, tons and tons. In an ideal world, we might have followed the Church on Ruby Road with a full series of Ncuti and Millie in January. And believe me, we tried. Way back in 2022, we juggled schedules and budgets and capacity, but no. We'd have ended up spending money on the rush rather than on the program itself. It's the effects really. People keep telling me how fast and easy effects are, and I hear the distant sobs of our FX teams. This stuff takes ages. Look at that gorgeous unit tower, the no things, the meep. It's months and months of hard work and well worth the wait. So right now, if you press play on the forthcoming episodes of Doctor Who, you'd see, and then it's February when that came out, so he launches in a shilling, the season 1 episodes. But I think that's just useful to really position, when people are saying, oh, in America, Church on Ruby Road's episode 1, in Britain, it's episode 0, Christmas special, we can't work out, was it intended to be, well, yeah, it was intended to be a Christmas special, but functionally episode 1 is what he's saying there. So Space Babies really is an episode 2, as far as I read what he's saying there.
Yeah, I guess so. The originally intended experience for British viewers was to have the same kind of structure, I guess, as almost the same as the American viewers, who get Space Babies as kind of a shit sandwich. So it's the one in between two notionally better ones. So that was kind of the idea for Space Babies. It was never actually meant to be the headliner, which I guess explains why it got doubled up with The Devil's Cord in its actual premiere. I guess to compensate for that, because man, yeah, it's the kind of episode that maybe you need to compensate for a little bit.
Yeah,
it makes you wonder why is it episode 2? Why shove it in the middle somewhere and hope no one notices? Because even needing to compensate for it is not the mindset you should be having. Compensation
is the word. That's a perfect segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about. In the April Doctor Who magazine, Russell tried to... I love this stuff. I think Moffat's very open about it too. When a showrunner is dealt not the best hand, and they bravely, they don't retreat. They try and say, this was my idea and it's brilliant, because you're making the best of a bad situation. When Russell was trying to justify the weird time slot thing that I know British viewers in particular are a lot of them were very upset about, he's talking about how the TV movie, there was all sorts of nonsense with that back in the 90s about buying the VHS around a week before it was actually shown on TV in Britain, and someone like doing a drive-by or walk-by, walking by and saying the spoilers. I don't know if you guys, if this was a New Zealand or England thing, but people used to do that for like Harry Potter books. I know in America and Australia and stuff, like, the midnight launches, you'd have people like driving around, oh, Snape kills Dumbledore, that sort of thing. So some saddo doing that for the Master falls in the Eye of Harmony to, I don't know, a couple of dozen people. It's a pretty funny thought. Poor younger Russell having to experience that. Loads of past Doctor Who had little aberration. Well, not loads, like actually very, very little example. The Five Doctors, the TV movie, that sort of thing. And so Russell was trying to say, well, there's always been, this happens. Times have changed and now you're in control, finally. You get to control how to absorb the episodes. And hey, Brits, don't you remember Game of Thrones? That came out at a weird time for us as well. We mostly trucked through it. He says, I know it's really hard to not get spoiled because it's hard not to engage with the internet because that's just life now, and it might even be part of your job that you're having to be somewhat online. So sometimes you're somewhat screwed, but there's always kind of a way around it, or there's often kind of a way around it, he's saying. So on the one side, you can kind of self-control a bit if you really want to avoid spoilers. On the other side, this is kind of life now. And look, you can experience the episode any way you want. Why don't you do the Harry Potter thing and midnight launch it all the time? So he's throwing out a bunch of different ways to try and say, hey, it's fine, the time slot thing and all that. My thing with that is, well, I think Missy would probably agree. Like, I have sympathy for Brits who are upset about it, but it's kind of hard to, like, Missy, that's always what we've experienced, right? Like,
it's like, yeah.
So, but I'm not doing like a crabs in the bucket thing. Like, I totally get how this sucks for Brits, but yeah.
It's not the end of the world. Well,
and Space Babies certainly isn't either. The other thing, though, that just gets me, this is such a minute thing, but I feel like we talk negatively about the Disney influence sometimes, but we're not like monolithically. Like, we've talked about how some of the Disney additional scenes are actually like the better ones, like in this episode, for example. But I don't want to get too much into this because I know we can't actually answer this. But everyone seems to be blaming the time slot thing on Disney, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, how was that, like, the American afternoon, how is that benefiting Disney? Doesn't it sound just like a stupid BBC decision to chase, like, oh, the streaming midnight release? Doesn't, like, this sounds more BBC coded to me than Disney coded. I could be totally off base, but Gig, you know the BBC the best. What do you think?
I think you're probably right. I think that is probably the case. Because at the end of the day, I mean, Disney Plus could release, if it was Disney Plus dictating a particular time to release their show, they could do it at any time. And, I mean, and it has been the norm for Disney Plus and streaming services in general to put their stuff out at maybe midnight, according to some other time zone. I mean, it's never actually, the idea that midnight UK time is some Disney like mandate. Like, why would Disney pick midnight in the UK if it's not even on Disney Plus in the UK? So focusing on midnight in the UK specifically, I think must have on some level come from the BBC side, and the weird impulses that exist at the BBC to try and make, I guess, iPlayer into, like, the Britain of Netflixes, the British Netflix, the British Disney Plus. We will have great British Netflix and it will be iPlayer, even though that doesn't really make any sense because, iPlayer isn't actually, I mean, it's just a different thing, isn't it? I mean, this is like a catch-up on-demand service for like a TV network.
Yeah.
And comparing that to Netflix, I mean, it doesn't really make sense. But I think institutionally, on all levels of Britain, there is this desperate kind of urge to make things sound like they're up to speed with the tech industry. And, Britain will be a tech leader and we'll have great British Rule Britannia versions of all these big hyped tech things, and we'll have great British AI. And yeah, I mean, it really is sad and desperate, but hype plays well to very stupid, very rich people. So I think that's just kind of the general desperation around it. So there won't actually be like a clear plan or coherent plan to make iPlayer into the British Netflix. But if you just say it a lot, you can just like pretend it will totally happen, and that will get, the cash rolling around, and that's what counts. So yeah, I think it just seems like a general superficial move to try and imitate what streaming services do, in the hope that it will just magic up more popularity and relevance for the show.
The only other bit from this, like, page 4, page 5, Russell defending all this stuff, piece that just kind of sticks out to me now is Russell saying something I think is actually really on point, where he says, he's talking about how, yes, the whole plots of the Giggle and Church and Ruby Road leaked, as we well know, months before transmission. And so he says, but there you go. If you're that online, you always will be. And in fact, that's part of your joy too. You like it. You love it. So for the run of this season, the hours after midnight will be your ultimate playground. Okay, I can only hope that your happiness doesn't dent someone else's. I think he's right. Like, I enjoy reading like the leaks, the years in advance or whatever. Like, I find that it's part of the joy for me as well. The funny thing though, and you two can 1,000% speak to this. Often, I do this sometimes, like, I'll love scooping up all the leaks like a year before, but in like the week or the fortnight before the actual episode, I go completely the other way and I start avoiding everything. Like, I know today, when we were recording this second bit of the Space Babies conversation, a very spoilery review / recap of 73 Yards leaked, and I immediately leapt to read it. And I know you two are avoiding it. And it's funny because like a year ago, we would have been hoovering up everything to do with 73 Yards. And now, it's within a couple of days. You get very reticent. I think I don't even completely understand the psychology of that, but it's such an interesting thing people like us do that love leaks.
See, I think I know what the difference is. It's because now, the week before it transmits, the episode is finished, and someone has watched it in its finished form and written up a spoilery recap of bullet point recap of every last detail. Whereas in the lead up to it being made, while we're watching the set reports and stuff and leaks from way ahead in production, all that kind of stuff like that, it's a bit vaguer because I guess it's not necessarily the final product. So we're there's just a degree in which you're learning about something as it's being made versus listening to someone kind of dispassionately recap something that's finished. And I think there is a little bit of a difference. Maybe I'm splitting hairs here, but I think there's a bit of a difference.
I think there's a very similar one that's like specifically to us as audiences, that say this kind of thing leaked like a year ago, it would, like 73 Yards would be some far off nebulous thing we would see one day, whereas like it leaking now is like, it's like 3 days away. So it's like that's a different feeling for like why would I read about something I'm gonna watch in like less than a week versus like some nebulous far off magical thing. And as it gets closer, that feeling of like, oh, it's a thing that's I'm gonna watch that, so I don't need to get into the spoilers as much. And also, maybe this is just me, but it's like this sort of like idea that like I'll forget by the time the episode comes around if I listen to like old spoilers, but like if I read it now, it'll be fresh in my memory by the time the episode comes around.
Very true. Very true.
Yeah. In the preview for Space Babies in this April magazine, Russell says, it's not a safe option, is it? Calling it Space Babies sums up how mad, fun, and different this is. It's not the story you might expect from a show that just signed up to a big streaming platform like Disney+. This episode boldly declares that Doctor Who has kept its nerve, cheek, and imagination. And then he talks about the opening scene. That's for the first timers, right? The magazine asks. And Russell says, to be honest, no. I was going to do that introductory stuff in the Church and Ruby Road, but then I didn't really want to end with a great long scene of talking in the TARDIS. You're right. It works here to explain stuff to new viewers. But also as an old viewer, I loved watching Amy, Clara, Yaz, and all the rest step into the TARDIS for the first time. There's such joy to be had when someone new comes in because the program re-energizes and you never run out of ways to do it. I've written half a dozen first enters the TARDIS scenes over the years and it's always different. So I guess that contextualizes, we found the ending of Church a bit weird. So I guess he's saying it'd be even weirder if we ended it on the big TARDIS exposition and then roll to credits. It's just an odd kind of, Church doesn't quite end and Babies almost doesn't quite start. It's a weird little connection there.
I mean, that sequence would be weird no matter where you put it. I think maybe that quote contextualizes how he wrote that whole sequence with Ruby first in the TARDIS and getting the lore dump from the Doctor about all the random little things that we don't really need. So he almost phrases it there like it's not actually necessarily for new viewers, but just for almost like just for the sake of it, having Ruby exposed to all these bits of info, like that's meant to be a pleasure in itself. I mean, I'm skeptical.
I guess part of the weirdness of it is that so for like all the other examples he's given, it's like they go into the TARDIS and then the sort of lore dump happens mid-adventure, or like at the beginning of an adventure, but it is really in this like weird nebulous zone where the plot of Church on Ruby Road has ended, but the plot of Space Babies hasn't started yet, and we've just got this big lump dumped in the middle of it. Also, it's just not very well written, which I think is a big problem with it.
That's to speak to that. Russell says a new show needs a big hook. I thought of the babies on my first day at Bad Wolf Studios. There must have been something on TV the night before about baby farms or something, sparking this idea that made me laugh of a baby farm run by actual babies. I initially thought of them walking around like Baby Herman in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That would have been impossible to make, so they're in pushchairs, which is doable and a better joke. But in fact, the episode isn't all about space babies. There are often three things going on in any Doctor Who. It's a bit like plate spinning, keeping it all in motion. This has got space babies and a monster. So it's a science fiction story with mystery and suspense, but it's also the personal story of Ruby finding out who she is and where she's from, which will be the spine of this series. We've seen she has a very happy family with a wonderful adoptive mother, but feels that urge to find out the truth about her past. That's a great story for any drama. I don't often give a companion so strong a story, but it's all heading somewhere, just you wait.
I like how we got sidetracked midway through talking about that and forgot about Space Babies and just moved on to series arc stuff instead.
I know it's how he writes, and he's so brilliant so much of the time. But for the quasi first episode, I just regurgitated something I watched on TV last night, and then I couldn't quite do the full joke, but it probably turned out funnier the way I don't know.
And earlier on, when you talked about how the babies represents how Doctor Who has lost none of its nerve and cheek, it's this self-consciousness, which I guess will be talked about more in the Devil's Cord discussion, which you'll be listening to after this. But I think so. This is like a preview of that, I guess. But I guess it's a self-consciousness about having so much cheek and having so much nerve and being so wacky that kind of the wackiness sort of takes over, and maybe it kind of distances you from having much of a story to it, or I don't know, approaching things very thoughtfully.
Yeah.
Now,
the last thing I have from Russell for Space Babies is the magazine saying how Ruby's story chimes with that of the Doctor, who we recently learned is adopted. And Russell says, that's a gift handed to me by my predecessor, Chris Chibnall, and it's an honor to take it on from him. There's so much story in it. We're dealing with it in what we're shooting now for Season 2, but Doctor Who has circled around this subject for decades. In the 60s, companions Vicky and Dodo were both orphans, which I think is an echo of Victorian melodrama and stories of orphans needing to be saved. More recently, Amy Pond had missing parents and Bill Potts was fostered, but I think this would creep into whatever I was writing, even if not Doctor Who. I'm at an age now where I know a lot of people who've fostered and adopted kids. My late husband's brother adopted 2 children, and another friend adopted 2 sisters. It's extraordinary to watch, lives changed by choice, children saved from what can be very difficult places. When I was married, it never featured in our thinking to do something like that, and I'm fascinated by other people's thinking. It's so extraordinary.
I think that's really cool, because the way the fact that the topic of adoption is kind of linked in a way, kind of maybe a tangential way, to his life and his community as well. Obviously, it's kind of something that will come up in relevance for like queer communities now and then, and it's just like it's not just a thing that he picked up from Chib just because Chib did it. It's something that is relevant to him and his interests as well. So that's a fortunate, I guess, confluence, not coincidence, just an aligning there. And I guess it kind of contextualizes how strongly RTD has kind of taken Chib's thing and kind of put a big focus on, I guess, the relatability of the adoption aspect.
Yeah. I want to talk about some music from the episode. To build off the kind of... Well, I think we were sort of unresolved in the Church on Ruby Road, where we got a lot into the music and a lot of interesting stuff in the music, and we all kind of poked and prodded a bit at the thing from... Well, it's in the giggle, and it's in 15's theme, kind of, and then so we were kind of going around... What could this mean, Murray? Is this all on purpose, or is this just you're using different bits of music to use different bits of music? Because he says that's sometimes what he does, but then sometimes it's very intentional. So we're all picking and prodding and everything at that. I want to play something that's from pretty far in the episode. It's when they're down in the basement bit and they're working out what the machine's done with the fairy tales and the babies and everything. I want to play that, and then I want to say something, and then I want to see you guys react to what I say. So let's listen to that. this is just like an illustrative example because all through the episode, that same sort of thing is happening where it's 15's theme with the same chromatic little descent thing going on. And so I still think it's really important that the first time we heard that was in the Giggle Companions dying montage. And so I still think there's some sort of link to Companions somewhere through that. But it's so consistently woven through 15's theme all through the episode and, onward in the season that, I agree more with what Gig said in the church discussion now than I did then. I think it's I don't know if it's inextricable, but it's linked very, 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 very heavily there. So maybe in the Giggle, I don't know what Murray's process was and what he came up with first. And I don't know if he was leaping forward with that. Obviously, a bit of music he found cool in that sequence, and then he found it cool in the 15 thing or whatever. But it's there.
I accept your concession. I'm sorry it took you this many months to get there, but I'm glad that we have arrived at equilibrium.
I've listened to it so many times. There's a squillion examples in the episode of them putting those two things together. It always sounds really cool. Anyway, the episode starts with I feel like reshoot is the wrong word because it's like the church footage is still there. It's just we've kind of done a new take on it now in Space Babies. But anyway, from that, the music they're doing there is really, really, really interesting. I want to play that and talk about that. So here's that. Ruby walking into the TARDIS. He's so maximalist, isn't he?
See, I like that he got a second chance to do another score for basically the same event that he did at the end of the previous episode. I think he's kind of carrying it a lot. I think here, that bit's really enjoyable. I mean, that chromatic descent that we keep talking about is really effective. I think I love that he keeps using it in this context.
It's so cool, yeah.
And I love the little electronic flourishes in this bit as well.
Yeah.
I think earlier on we talked about how I mentioned how that redoing of Ruby walking into the TARDIS is kind of more from her perspective and kind of it's in her head more. And I think the sheer building up of this music as she goes into it, it has the job of basically selling that this is the start of an episode, even though we already saw it. So it has to kind of do most of the work here, almost, the music. So I think that kind of explains why he's going so massive with it.
Yeah, there's this tense excitement to it. The drums are very loud.
The kick drum is, yeah.
It reminded me of, maybe not an exact, stuff, but, the vibe. It reminded me of, the ending of the pilot where Bill goes to get into the TARDIS. It's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
I was going to say, yeah.
Which is interesting. And yeah, he carries that scene a lot. And, yeah, he does. I was going to say something mean about how bad it is, but we've said that a billion times. I don't like it.
I don't like the ending of the pilot. That's too max for me, but this works for me.
Oh yeah, no, the music's great. I meant the writing.
Oh, yeah. The whole first 5 minutes of this episode is mostly Murray, in my opinion. The next bit I find interesting is when 15's doing this dialogue I don't like, where he's talking about all the Time Lord names, and for some reason we're expositing all this Time Lord stuff right away. Yeah, let's listen to that. That's interesting music going on there when you cut out the dialogue.
interesting that we hear the chromatic descent followed by like a tweaked version of it.
Yeah.
Kind of the normal one plays and then slightly off kind of key version plays.
Very whimsical, the descent there as well. The instrumentation. There's so much going on. It's like the dialogue feels so like trite. And then Murray's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because this, like listening to this, I did not hear this in the episode.
Yeah.
No, me neither.
I was like so busy focusing on like the Rani, the Conquistador, but like this is so kind of like it fits with the end of that where he's talking about losing his people, but over just like the most banal lore dump. It's like very jarring, and this is really, really beautiful stuff. It's much nicer than the dialogue. The descending thing that we've been talking about, and while listening to this one, it made me feel like just sort of a cheeky sense of anticipation. There's sort of like where's this going, which I feel is just sort of a neat thing to have in the music going on in the show, because that it just feels neat. It's like we're going like, oh, where's the show going? What's, plot wise, what's this episode about, and arc wise, what's going on, and just it makes me want more. It's intriguing. I like it.
He's getting so much mileage out of Ruby's theme as well. You're slowing it down and just using little bits of it and things like it's such a complicated. There's so many parts to it that you can really do a lot with it, which is why I really liked Summer Sagan's music a lot, but it tended to be less. It's complex isn't the right word. There's more parts is what I mean. Like there's a lot to Ruby's theme. It goes through a lot of different sections, and so you can use. Like, we'll get to this later on. There's a bit of a Good Man, the 12th Doctor's theme, later on in this episode, because there's so many bits of that music that you can use a bit of it, and it's not immediately obvious what you're doing. Like, if you use the main bit of I'm the Doctor, everyone would recognize it, but there's little bits of that you could use, and, like, your head would go, I know that, but you wouldn't, like, immediately flag it. So I like with Ruby's theme, there's so much going on, you can kind of use little bits without it being super obvious that, oh, it's the waltz. Anyway, next... it happens more than once this episode. I think my favorite sort of thing Murray does is when he puts one bit of music you recognize, and then he moves into another bit of music you recognize, and then by doing that, he's making a statement, like through the linkage of that. It's like the Kuleshov effect of like music. He's like, it's here and then it's there, and because I've put them right next to each other, you're making like an association. This one, I think people noticed in the episode more because it's a very iconic bit of music. Anyway, here it is.
See, for me, hearing Gold's Time Lord This Is Gallifrey theme played over a discussion of stuff that happened to Gallifrey during Chibhu and the frankly appalling treatment of all those concepts through Chibhu, and the fact that it's been re-genocided off screen again, I felt a kind of secondhand embarrassment. Like, damn, like actual soul and emotion is being applied to this thing that was just so artless and so tactless and charmless, and we're just oh no, I don't like this. I want these things to stay separate. But no, I see what you kind of want to draw attention to there. The fact that we get that very mournful This Is Gallifrey, and then it just abruptly cuts off, and we get 15's very pumped up theme kind of just taking over in a kind of whimsical way.
Yeah, I feel the kind of opposite, in the same way that RTD's handling of the Timeless Child thing doesn't exactly map onto the Chib era. It's like the fact that we didn't really hear the This Is Gallifrey motif in the Chib era. Hearing it again now that it's over, it kind of serves to like disconnect those eras even further. That I can I've forgotten the word, but I can remove the Chib era and place it in its own little box separate from everything else.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It feels so giggle coded to me. that sequence of it's like, yes, sad thing happened, but now I'm 15 and that's over. Now I'm happy. And so it's totally fine. Because it's like the music, it's not even like a very elegant transition from sad into happy. It's like, yes, sad thing. Now we're happy. That's by generate. It just feels very like what we sang with the giggle, which I like a lot. Interesting thing there as well is that sequence. So that's, adoption, they're dead, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, let's roll. That's the sequence where we get that very weird cut where presumably Push the Button was meant to have played because he's pointing the Sonic and then we weirdly go to the rotor and then it's all cut around weirdly. So
yeah, he moves towards the jukebox and then suddenly he's not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Another bit of interesting music from towards the start of the episode in the Disney scene after we get like Lizard Ruby and he like fixes it and he lets the butterfly go and all of that and then he goes back into the TARDIS and he talks about the butterfly compensators. The music there is interesting. Let's have a little listen.
That all felt very Smith era coded to me, like
Yeah,
2005.
yeah.
I mean, that is that series was kind of the origin of that silly TARDIS music that you referred to in the previous discussion, like the Pandorica, songs like that. And the kind of the first half of that is very much like one of those songs. And then the kind of Wonderland sort of whimsical kind of fairy tale kind of thingy that happens in the second half, that also feels kind of lifted out of that kind of Peter Pan kind of fairy tale world of Eleven and Amy.
Yeah, I love all these little variations on Ruby's stuff. I just think work so well. The return of the silly TARDIS music, and then we've got this huge new theme which we keep getting tweaked in endless ways. I feel I'm not really clicking with a lot of this era, to my disappointment, but the music, I feel like I'm at home. So it's just really nice to have so much going on. I'll say what I do is after I watch a episode now, I not like immediately after, but like at some point after in the week, I watch it again, but I turn the center channel off. So like with surround sound, the center channel is like the dialogue channel. That's where all the words come from. So I turn that off, and then I watch the episode, and so I'm just getting like the music and some of the sound effects. And I know, Gig, you've said this before that it sounds like I have an improved experience with some episodes doing that, and this would be one where. Yeah, I enjoyed it more without the dialogue, but that's a compliment to Murray. That's a testament to Murray. There's lots of music I liked in this episode.
Slightly off topic, but I also did a post watch again that made me enjoy the episode more. I watched the episode in the lounge with my parents, and I have really poor eyesight, so I was sitting very far away from the television, and not being able to see the VFX as much made me like really like Space Babies, which is funny.
So you could still hear the dialogue and Ncuti saying Space Babies every 5 seconds, but you still enjoyed the episode.
I enjoyed it like a lot more than when I watched it like on my own, like in my room.
And how did your parents take it?
Oh, they both like loved it. They both were really weird on the idea of Space Babies, but they enjoyed it. They enjoyed it overall. They loved Ncuti and Millie, and yeah, to them it was a very good opening episode.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's like a squillion 15 variations I could go through. I won't. There's just one I want to show, which is the big "Hey, we actually have money now" shot of when the TARDIS is warping into the station. The 15 theme that plays there is pretty cool. Let's have a little listen to that one.
Yeah, I particularly liked that shift when the TARDIS comes out of the vortex. You kind of hear kind of the change in the music, and as it kind of begins its final approach to, boring spaceship number 10,006. I like that it's kind of the music is doing a lot to sort of make this actually seem like a really fun exposition that we just expedition that we've just set out on.
When the babies are unveiled, some music plays, and I don't want to give a leading question here, so I'm just going to play this and not say what I'm thinking, because I need to hear what you guys think. So this comes from when we gave like a big unveiling of the babies.
So, as you know, I've been really happy that Murray Gold's back in the show. But there will always be moments. And during this, when the scene played in the episode, it was one of those moments when I thought, oh, yep, Murray Gold is back in the show. Yeah. One of those times where you think the same thing, but with a slightly different inflection. I think, and I guess my issue with this bit is that it feels, for all that RTD has talked up this idea of the babies being one that made him laugh, that he put in because he found it funny and it's cheeky and ha ha ha, like, scoring it like this feels humorless in a way. It's like it's taking itself so fucking serious, like it's so earnestly invested in the miracle of the babies, and it actually becomes a little bit insufferable, considering it's when it's paired up with what's going on screen, which is already this huge swing of these CGI lipped babies kind of swinging around. For the music to be kind of overloading you at the same time is like, please, like on one front, can you give us some slack, please? Give us a rest, please.
Yeah, it's weirdly earnest in a way that doesn't work. I've been racking my brain because it sounds like really familiar to me. And
yes, that's what have you worked out what it sounds like?
I'm going to say something, and I don't think it's right, but it's the only thing that's come to mind. It sounds like something from the first Harry Potter movie.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, I think I know what you mean. Not you mean like the second half of that when it's like getting all
yeah.
That bit.
I can hear from your reaction that that's not at all what you were thinking.
I feel like in my head I can see like they're in the Great Hall at Hogwarts.
Yeah.
And there's like a big dinner sequence. I wasn't even thinking of that. Some part of it does feel John Williamsy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Around 13 seconds into that clip, there's a bit that goes like, and it's, for the life of me, I don't actually think it's an intentional reference, but it sounds so much to me like what Gig a few years ago sang on the channel, the Ghost Monument TARDIS theme, which is
my god,
it sounds like exactly like that to me. I don't know if Murray subconsciously was doing anything there, or if it's just convergent evolution or something, but that really shook me out in the episode when I felt like I hear that and I don't like it, but that sounds so familiar to me. And
it caused like a primal reaction when you hear that motif played in any context. Like the hairs on your arms stand up.
Exactly like the bogeyman screaming like frequency. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
17 hertz.
The third last bit I want to talk about musically is this goes through like three different things. This is when 15's like puts the headset on and it's like NAN-E's saying, come to you come to this zone, damn it. There's like three different bits of music that happen here and all are really interesting. And the third bit I recognize from Church. See what we think of this bit.
I really enjoy that middle bit when 15's theme is kind of sped up. It's going at kind of a quick pace, kind of. But listening to that, it reminded me of the old unit theme from RTD1.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, just completely meaningless connection there, but just kind of reminded me of.
The more I hear that descending thing, the more I'm like super into it, because I really like. So I do hear it sometimes in the episodes, but like with this drawing more and more attention to it, it does make me think of like falling down a rabbit hole like Alice. It's very fairy tale-y. I like it, and I also agree with you how. I wasn't initially the biggest fan of 15's theme when it was first played at the at that big concert it was played at, Unveiled that. But I've grown to like it in the episode. I really like all the variations it has. I like the different things that Murray Gold is doing with it, and how it adds and changes up a scene. So yeah, I like that one. Yeah,
the different pieces of it are all very effective in their own ways, and they're very adaptable. I think you don't really get like the full scope of that when you just hear it played, I guess, in order at the concert. But it's been pretty well done so far, I think, during the show.
The third bit there, which is playing as they're like talking about, so this is what you do, Doctor. You go help people, blah, blah, blah. Ruby, you're weird. Your life's weird too. That bit, it's the music I effused over with the church discussion when 15's uncharacteristically crying and he's like, they took the baby, and he's like crying over they took the baby, and he's walking around the flat and it's all dark and stuff now. The bit that's like dun 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 dun, and like it's all bassy and stuff. I really like that music in church, so it's cool to hear it here. And hey, that music was babies in church, and now they're also talking about rescuing babies and things like that. So that was cool.
It's also specifically like Ruby stuff, right? Because it's
yeah. It's just, I feel like we've already got so many different bits of music that Murray can like flick around, like specifically for this new era, and like it's triggering different things. It's cool to have built up like a vocabulary so quickly.
And this is only the second episode, but it already feels like the musical identity of this era is distinctly different from like the Capaldi one, the Smith one, and the
last two bits of music I have to talk about for Space Babies, they're from the same sequence as well, where the monster's getting ripped into space. I don't want to lead the question here either, but I'm just going to ask, does this music sound familiar to you? So this is before 15 is like going, I'm going to save it, and montage in my head time. This is like a little bit before that. This is just when like Nanny's got him and the monster's getting ripped to shreds and we're like watching and all that's going on.
That first sequence of da 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 da, that feels very familiar. Is that kind of a recurring thing in Gold, or am I just like misremembering it from somewhere else? Right, yeah.
It's very familiar. Do you recognize it, Missy?
It's from RTD1, is it?
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what it is. It's either a chase thing or like...
Yeah, it's the big like Tennant era action theme.
Yeah.
All the strange creatures.
Oh, God, of course it is.
That's what it's called.
So, it's Donna, and he's like running around a corridor. That's the music we would like always get. I was very overstimulated in the episode with everything going on. So my brain didn't go, hey, I like and know that music from 2007. But yeah, that's, there was a version of it in the 60th, I remember, that I barely heard. And our friend Tyler was super excited over that. And I could barely hear it. But here, I hear it big and loud, and it's nice in moderation, that theme. I think it was a bit overused back many years ago, but I was very excited to hear it properly here now. And going into 15's theme at the end, I just love this unity. Like, you know, when Russell and Moffat are like, it's all the one show. That's why we don't do a New Who anniversary. I like when like a Tenet bit of music is working in the 15 episode and then it goes into 15's theme. It's just, I like that a lot. That really works for me.
Yeah, it's like, I like how it fits in with what you guys said earlier about this era already having its own unique musical identity, which makes when older things get brought in, it reinterprets them in interesting ways.
Well, that's exactly the idea behind the last bit of music I have to talk about, which is like from like 30 seconds after that bit. So it's when 15's like thinking Monster is similar to me, and I said things that relate to the monster earlier in the episode. I must save Monster. I must be a good man and save this monster.
See, I think with some of these themes for past Doctors and things, or specific little bits of them, I think because of how they're written, and I guess how they were used during the show, it's almost like they start to less represent the specific character they might have been written for, and more almost like a theme, almost like a universal theme. So hearing that bit that's very obviously from 12's theme, in this episode, it didn't make me think like, oh, 12, there's Capaldi, here's 12. It was like, it just seemed to speak like directly to, I guess, the idea that was kind of there in 12's run, which is just like the idea of like, the Doctor, the Doctor's motivations, the Doctor's desire to do good and things like that. So it's like it almost transcends being just 12's theme and it becomes almost like a universal motif that's just in the show now, like just to represent these things, which is really cool. I think, it's not a criticism. It's just, something very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. It's super cool. And it fits with like the idea that this is all one show, that this is all one character. It's like, that's not the theme of the 12th Doctor. It's the theme of the Doctor at that point in his life. Like, that's what he was going through, and it's represented with that music.
I love as well, it's not the main, most iconic bit of 12's theme. So I like that it's for some reason that just works better in my head when we're using these kind of slightly less major components of a theme. It just something about that I think feels less ostentatious. It just kind of works better in my brain. And it's because the storytelling and the music, it's doing the exact same thing. I'm going to be a good man and save the monster. Yes, and the music is literally called a good. It's just I love all that. I think that's so cool.
The reason it worked, it like made sense in my head, is that the bit of 12's theme it's using is kind of in the like uncertain realm, like the am I a good man bit, rather than the triumphant I am a good man bit. So it fits to have the 12's am I a good man that leads into 15's heroic yes I am theme before he goes to save the monster. Yeah,
I think if they used the climax of the theme, it would be tipping the scales too much. It would just make you think, oh, it's 12. Whereas using the bit that's not quite resolved, like you described, it just puts you in mind of like the things that 12 was going through rather than just him or his identity.
Yeah, so like we've just talked about for around half an hour, the music, it's definitely my favorite bit of Space Babies, but I don't really feel like that's damning with faint praise as much as, because the music's a huge part of this format of the show, this type of the show, Russell Moffat versions of the show. So it's not like a minor piece of the episode. It's just the bit of this episode that I can unabashedly say I really love. Other bits I loved less, but I'd like to know, what did everyone else think? Everyone listening, what did you think of this episode 0/1, whatever you want to call it. Thoughts on our thoughts. Share anything you think. We always love to read all that. And as always, thank you very much for listening. Cheers.